Good to have you with us, Ed Schultz, news and commentary on this Monday edition. Ever go to the office on a Monday and say, gosh, there's just so much going on. Where do I start? I'm going to take for granted you know exactly what's going on if you're following the news and being a news junkie. The White House defending the move by the president, that this is not anti-Muslim, that this is all part of the fight on terrorism and protecting the country. That being said, the rollout was interesting. It was done on a need-to-know basis. Some very high-priority people in our government did not know the way this vetting process was going to take place and the way it was rolled out. In the meantime, I'm going to go fast forward and take this position. If this is so bad, which I personally believe it is, I believe that President Trump is out of bounds. I believe that he doesn't have to go this far. I believe that if they were going to do this, they could have done this in a much different manner. And I think the message could have been sent to the world that could have been a lot different. Yes, we're concerned about security. We're going to do something about it. It looks terrible. It looks like we're picking on a faith. It looks like we're picking and choosing the best strawberries in the grocery store, if you know what I mean. And we want to kick some people out. That's what the world's viewing us right now. If this is all that bad, why doesn't the United States Senate do something about it? I'll tell you why. Because they're reading the polls and they're listening to the White House. And the White House is saying, hey, middle America's for us on this. If you look at the polls that are out there, Sean Spicer just at a briefing a few moments ago saying that the media ought to get out of Washington and realize what's going on across the country. Look, I don't know what the polls are, but I do know this. If Chuck Schumer's going to cry and get emotional, if people are going to be all bent out of shape over this, don't we deserve a government that's going to do something about it? Getting a vote to the Senate floor on this should not be that hard. But wait a minute, Mitch McConnell, who's famous for not bringing votes to the floor, is now giving the old stiff arm to Senator Feinstein and Senator Schumer when it comes to reversing this executive order. So what are we finding out? This is the Republican power in action, folks. For more on this, let's go to Katrina Vanden Heuvel, editor, part owner of The Nation. Katrina, nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Ed.
I want your thoughts on where we go from here and everything, everything that has been said and the way this is unfolding. Your thoughts on where we go from here. So
let me just begin that this ban is likely unconstitutional. It's cruel. It disses American values. It's un-American. It's cowardly. It's dangerous. Where we go from here, I think we need to take a hard eye at this White House, which is going to govern as if it's in permanent campaign. Chaos, disruption, change. Steve Bannon appears to want to instigate a constitutional crisis, which to some extent has already happened. You look at the way the Muslim ban was rolled out, Ed. Bannon had to know that the courts would immediately step in to halt the deportations on multiple legal grounds. But not only did he seek that confrontation, think of this, in the most provocative way, it was his idea to overrule the Department of Homeland Security, include green card holders in the immigration ban. So they wanted the highest possible controversial, high-profile order in order to gin up the base. I think it's what's going on right now, Ed, is there's resistance in the streets. Resistance matters. We've seen 2 weekends. I think it was just a few days ago, Trump was inaugurated. We saw this past weekend, there were protests, tens of thousands attending rallies in more than 30 cities nationwide. You had people at airports across the country, lawyers from the ACLU, other advocacy groups moved swiftly to file legal challenges to Trump's order. The people are leading. The protesters are saying, not in our name, not on our watch. And this may be a permanent motif of Trump's term. It may well be. And if no one else is going to fight for American values, it falls to the American people. Resistance matters. Rebuilding matters. However, Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, good senator, has he's going to introduce legislation to immediately overturn Trump's dangerous, hateful executive order. Will we see others rallying and joining with him? This is a measure of our representation. You do see in cities and states around this country, Ed, commitment to sanctuary cities. And I think that will be a very important measure of driving the resistance in a creative and important way. So there's a lot going on. I think people are overwhelmed. The pace of change is, for some, those who voted for Trump, I guess it's what they wanted. You can't ignore that. Mm-hmm. But it's being done in such a chaotic, incompetent, and cruel way.
It seems like it was done like there's a very tight inner circle within Trump. And it's like a militaristic, it's on a need-to-know basis. And when you start excluding some of the high levels of officials who are supposed to have the power to do this and implement this stuff that didn't know about it, that the Department of Homeland Security is getting quick memos and bullet points on how to do this on the spot at airports.
At airports, I know. I mean, so you're seeing, customs officials, it's already arisen a constitutional crisis. Some Border Patrol have been defying court orders, right, by detaining legal residents without access to attorneys. But you're right. Well, it's not a coup. I mean, people have been talking about a coup, Ed. What we're seeing is the creeping, it's only been about 2 weeks, right, so pretty quickly creeping, centralization of power in a small, tightly knit group of people who do have tendencies toward authoritarian politics. I mean, alt-right, it's a code word for white supremacist, repackaging, relabeling of white nationalism, but it's also about a kind of politics that is keeping it tight-fisted, keeping it within a small circle. And I have to say one of the most troubling pieces of news yesterday, which was buried in some of the stories then became more apparent, is that Donald Trump, in reorganizing the National Security Council, has changed the principals list. So Steve Bannon has been empowered. He is now a regular member of the NSC Council. Yeah. And the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Director of National Intelligence are kind of on a need to know. I mean, they're there when they're needed. It
seems that way. Now, Spicer, just in his briefing a few moments ago, talked just about this, and I want your response on it.
I don't think I can underscore this enough. What we're saying is nothing has changed. We've, in fact, added and grown this. The Director of National Intelligence and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs are, by statute, part of the NSC. Full stop. What we've done is made sure that on issues of homeland security and domestic policy, they are always welcome to attend, 100%. However, if the issue is on, pandemic flu or other domestic type natures that don't involve the military, it would be a waste of time to drag the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff over. If he wants to attend, he's part of the committee. He can come anytime. So to try to talk about downgrading or not take this seriously is a misreading of this. It's really a disservice. And I think that for those people who took the time to read it, they understand that. But I've seen so much misreporting all this weekend about downgrading this individual or upgrading.
Well, that's a pretty slick answer. The fact is he's not addressing that now a politico, an ideologue, Steve Bannon, is now in the ring.
Absolutely. Those were alternative interpretations of alternative facts. There has been a change. The core point is that there was a change made. The NSC has had a list of principals, people who attend every meeting, and that change has been made so that they're welcome, the Joint Chiefs Chair and the Director of National Intelligence. But who's going to decide maybe they're not welcome at some of these meetings? The key thing, Ed, is we're witnessing, as you said, Steve Bannon, Jared Kushner. These are pretty unaccountable people. And
what qualifications do they have to be put in this position?
The qualification is Jared Kushner is Donald Trump's son-in-law, and Mr. Bannon, I guess, served in the Navy. I mean, give me a break. I mean, these qualifications. Now, I will say that what's important is judgment, Ed. I mean, when Bernie Sanders ran in the primaries and people said he didn't have experience, I often think judgment is important and the kind of people you bring around you. We have seen a failure of judgment in the rollout, for sure, and just the basic sense of politics and how to govern. And we have seen people with pissy qualifications. Yeah. And, these are not people who have public interest at the center of their attention. I do think it is interesting, this blunt order is going to make America less secure. And it's, this idea, the Orwellian named title of the, executive order, and this odious immigration ban doesn't include immigrants from Saudi Arabia or Egypt, countries that were home to the 9/11 attackers, nor, it is very important to point out, the Trump Organization business interests are not touched. They did not touch any countries where he has financial interests. And so it's just a network of increasing centralization of power in the hands of the worst people, opacity, calculated attacks on the media in order to delegitimize an institution when at its best it holds accountable public officials who abuse the trust or abuse financial interests, who fail to be transparent. That is the media's role. It is the case media has, sometimes been too self-serving. They're different kind of media, but the media at its best serves a vital function, which this administration has decided it's going to go to war against.
Yeah.
So it's a tough time, and I think we got to keep the resistance and the rebuilding and the exposing and the speaking of true American values at the top of our agenda.
Now, the Democrats are going to try to bring some to the floor. I don't think Mitch McConnell's going to do anything about that. The Democrats are also playing on two different fields here. Tonight, in front of the Supreme Court at 6 o'clock, they're going to rally support against any nominee that the president is going to announce tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for the Supreme Court to demand that this judge be in the mainstream. Here's Amy Klobuchar on how it should all come down.
Well, I'm in the camp that believes we have to use the Senate rules that have been in existence for a long, long time. And that is that for the Supreme Court, unlike the nominees before us today for the cabinet, has always been held to a 60-vote threshold. And that is what I believe, and there's been no change to those rules. And so that means you need 60 senators. So that pushes us.
Well, what prompted that question and response from the Democratic senator from Minnesota is that Trump has advocated nuclear option in the Senate to change the rules to get exactly what he wants on the court. Your thoughts, Katrina?
Well, of course he's advocated that. He is a walking nuclear option. I think Amy Klobuchar gets it just right, and I think the fight is on. And I think it's not just playing hardball for the sake of strategic fights. It's playing hardball for the sake of a court that is true to the values and principles which make this country great. And, the Republicans, for too long, Ed, we've talked about this, Democrats, too many of them show up at a gunfight with a knife. I hate those analogies, but it's true.
Yeah.
And I think it's time. We've seen in North Carolina the authoritarian tactics of a Republican Party ramrodding legislation through the voter suppression that is rampant, Republican-led. It is time to take a stand, and I think standing firm on opposing what will obviously be a regressive, extremist, retrograde judicial appointment is vital for Democrats.
Katrina, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Great work of The Nation, always. Katrina Vanden Heuvel, editor, part owner of The Nation magazine. Today was not without personality bashing. It starts with Chuck Schumer. He tears up about President Trump's immigration ban.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American. It was implemented in a way that created chaos and confusion across the country.
Well, that's all President Trump had to hear. He went right after him this morning while signing an executive order on small business.
I noticed Chuck Schumer yesterday with fake tears. I'm going to ask him who is his acting coach, because I know him very well. I don't see him as a crier. If he is, he's a different man. There's about a 5% chance that it was real, but I think they were fake tears.
And it didn't stop there. At the press briefing today, Sean Spicer took a jab at the senator.
We're going to put the safety of Americans first. We're not going to wait and react. As I said in the statement, the president's going to be very proactive with protecting this country. We're not going to wait till we get attacked and figure out how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. He's going to do everything in his power to stop every threat that we face in this country and every potential threat. And that's the key point in this. How do we get ahead of threats? How do we keep America ahead of the curve when it comes to people who want to do us harm? And that's what the president's done, is he's made sure that every way possible we get down the path of securing this country, putting America's safety and security first and foremost, bar none.
And they think, the White House does, they believe that they have the majority of the American people behind them on this. The overseas reaction, we'll talk about that when we come back on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Thanks for joining us. Ed Schultz, News and Commentary. Nadia Aziz joins us now. She's a Government Relations Director, Arab American Institute. Nadia, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
The overseas reaction has been pretty high-pitched and fervent, no question about it. Shock, I guess, is the word. Iraq says that they will reciprocate in some way. They want the United Nations to weigh in on all of this. And the 7 countries that have been labeled in this executive order and tabbed in this executive order, the White House today in their press briefing, Sean Spicer says they're not concerned about their reaction. Where are we and where are we going? Your take on all of this.
Sure. Well, last week, President Trump continued his kind of shock and awe campaign of issuing executive actions. This Muslim ban is just the latest in his state-sanctioned bigotry. He's living up to all of the bigoted promises he seems to have made on the campaign trail. He's been president for just over a week, and within the first 7 days in office, he managed to completely unravel some of our nation's proudest traditions, and in doing so, created a constitutional crisis. Right now, there are reports of people being detained in airports across the country, not being allowed to see attorneys. They're being questioned about their views on President Trump. They're being asked to hand over their cell phones and social media information. And you have Customs and Border Patrol officers who aren't complying with federal courts. So either President Trump doesn't understand basic American governance or he just doesn't care.
Now, today, Spicer said that there was only 109 people that were detained and they've been released. And it's your knowledge that there are still people in captivity, I guess you would call it. They can't leave. They're being held captive and questioned at airports. What's the truth here?
Sure. So first, I would just like to say that's from the same White House that also said there were the biggest crowds at Donald Trump's inauguration in history.
Sure.
So I would certainly be taking all of that information with a grain of salt. But yes, as far as I can tell, there's reports of folks still being detained, not let in. Over the weekend, there were members of Congress that showed up to airports to try and help get some of the folks released. But as far as I can tell, there's still people being detained in airports.
Do you view this as anti-Muslim? The Trump team says, no, it's not. It's a part of fighting terrorism and protecting the country.
I would absolutely say that this is sort of a bigoted anti-Muslim act. It is the Muslim ban in practice.
CARE has filed a lawsuit. There are some constitutional scholars that say that the White House is on solid ground here because it was written so vaguely. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's a heavy lift, isn't it, to ask a federal judge to go against the President of the United States? Your thoughts on where this is going to go. And then, of course, you've got 14 attorneys generals across the country who are saying that they're going to fight back against this. This could be... And it's a 90-day executive order. This is not open-ended. It's going to end, but what it is, it's kicked up a firestorm, legal firestorm that's rather amazing. Do you think they're on constitutional ground, or what's the outcome of this?
No, I certainly think this executive order is unconstitutional. The fact that it's vague, I don't think helps the case. I think it makes it worse for the government. Some of the scholars they said were consulted on this included people like Rudy Giuliani. So that's not very comforting to the Muslim community and all the immigrants that this impacts. I think we're going to continue to see legal challenges from coalitions and advocacy groups, including the ACLU. I think we're going to continue to see large crowds at airports, large crowds at the White House protesting every weekend until this is rescinded, or even impeachment. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see which comes first.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. I guess there's a little protection going on right now. If they were to bring the proposed bill to the floor of the Senate and there was a vote to rescind this executive order and the president didn't go along with it, we'd have a constitutional crisis of sorts, and that might be grounds for impeachment. But I think that we're going to see McConnell protect the president and never bring this to the floor and never start any kind of dialogue back and forth between the House and the Senate, which are held by Republicans. That's how I see it. On the other hand,
I agree.
What do you think?
I agree with that, Ed.
Yeah.
I agree. I think McConnell's going to continue to protect the president. I think we've seen this from the Senate Republicans, in my opinion, not doing their job from when they blocked President Obama's Supreme Court nomination. They failed to approve hundreds of, or at least over 100 federal vacancies on the federal bench. They're not doing their job, and it's doing a disservice to the American people. I don't think this will be brought up for a vote. I would be surprised if it did.
Arab American Institute, what kind of action is your organization going to take?
Sure. We've been working with our communities on the ground to make sure they have the information they need, the legal resources they need, and we've been asking folks to reach out to all of their elected officials from city council and mayors on up. We're working with organizations to pass no bigotry and solidarity resolutions in city councils. For example, the Philadelphia City Council just passed an anti-Islamophobia resolution while the GOP had their summit in Philly. So we're working with groups like that on the ground to push back on this and really support the advocates that are out there.
Nadia, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Nadia Aziz, Government Relations Director, Arab American Institute. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We'll see you tonight, 8 o'clock on the Tube. We're back tomorrow.